Hello, my dear listeners. Welcome back to Second Chapters, the podcast where real lives unfold, where secrets find their voice, and where it's never, ever too late for the truth. I'm your host, and I have something special to share with you today. We've received so many of your stories, hundreds of emails sitting in my inbox, each one a window into a life fully lived, mistakes made, lessons learned. And starting today, I'm going to read them to you myself. Your stories, your voices, your second chances. So while you're clicking that subscribe button, and please do because these stories deserve to be heard, let me tell you about Vera. Vera Hutchins. She's 73 years old, and 3 months ago, she did something she thought she'd never do. She opened a letter that had been hidden in her deceased husband's workshop for 40 years. A letter that wasn't addressed to him. A letter that would unravel everything she thought she knew about her marriage, her choices, and the man she let go in 1965. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me read you Vera's story exactly as she wrote it to us. And I promise you, by the end, you'll understand why some secrets refuse to stay buried and why love after 60 isn't about starting over. It's about finally understanding what was there all along. The story begins. Dear Second Chapters, my hands are shaking as I write this. I'm 73 years old, and I thought I had made peace with my life. I thought I knew everything about the man I was married to for 48 years. I was wrong. My name is Vera Hutchins, and until 3 months ago, I believed I had lived an honest, simple life. I grew up in Dalton, Pennsylvania. One of those towns where everyone knows everyone, where secrets are currency and reputation is everything. The kind of place where the same families have lived for generations, where your grandmother's mistakes still get whispered about at church socials, where leaving is seen as betrayal and staying is seen as virtue. In 1963, when I was 21, there were two men in my life. The first was Clayton Moore. Clayton was safe. He was the son of the town's only dentist, destined to take over his father's practice. He wore crisp shirts even on Saturdays, never drank more than one beer, and he looked at me the way you look at something you're planning to purchase, with careful consideration and absolute certainty that you're making a sound investment. Clayton's mother, Judith, had already picked out china patterns for our future home. His father had already planned out where Clayton's office would be in the practice. The corner office with windows overlooking Main Street. In their minds, I wasn't Vera Hutchins, the daughter of a mill worker who could barely keep the lights on. I was the future Mrs. Clayton Moore, the dentist's wife, the woman who would host dinner parties and volunteer at the library and raise their grandchildren in the house 3 blocks from theirs. The second man was Donovan Pierce. Donovan was everything Clayton wasn't. He worked construction, drove a motorcycle that made the church ladies clutch their pearls, and he looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered. When Donovan loved you, you felt it in your bones. Donovan grew up on the other side of the tracks, literally. There was a railroad line that cut through Dalton, and everyone knew which side you came from. Donovan's father had died in a factory accident when Donovan was 12. His mother cleaned houses to keep food on the table. Donovan started working construction at 16, lying about his age to get hired. By 23, he had forearms like steel cables and a reputation for being the hardest worker on any crew. I met them both the same summer, 1962. Clayton at a church picnic where his mother introduced us, clearly having orchestrated the entire encounter. Donovan at the diner where I work evenings, slinging coffee and pie to make ends meet, while my mother slowly died of cancer in the bedroom she'd once shared with my father. Clayton asked me out properly. He came to the front door, shook my father's hand, told him exactly where we'd be going and when I'd be home. We went to the movies, to the one nice restaurant in town, to concerts at the community center where the high school band played Benny Goodman covers. Donovan didn't ask. He just showed up at the diner at closing time one night and said, "I'm taking you for a ride." We went up to Miller's Point, where you could see the whole valley spread out below, all those little lights twinkling in the darkness. He didn't try to kiss me that first night. He just talked. about his dreams of leaving Dalton someday, seeing the ocean, working on fishing boats, living somewhere where your last name didn't define your future. I fell in love with both of them in different ways. I loved Clayton's steadiness, the way he represented everything my parents wanted for me: security, respectability, a life without struggle. But I was in love with Donovan, with his calloused hands and his green eyes, and the way he made me feel like I could be anyone, do anything, go anywhere. My mother knew. Mothers always know. She called me into her bedroom one night in early 1963. She was so thin by then, the cancer eating her from the inside out. The medical bills were stacked on the dresser, a constant reminder of everything we owed and couldn't pay. "Vera," she said, taking my hand with fingers that felt like bird bones, "I need to talk to you about your future." I knew what was coming. I'd seen it in my father's eyes every time Donovan pulled up on that motorcycle. I'd heard it in the silences at dinner when Clayton's name came up. "Donovan is a good boy," she continued. "But goodness doesn't pay medical bills. Goodness doesn't put food on the table when his back gives out from construction work at 45. You love him now in that wild young way. But love doesn't keep the lights on, honey. I learned that the hard way." She told me about her own youth, about a boy she'd loved before my father. A boy with dreams and poetry and no prospects. "I chose your father because he had a steady job at the mill," she said. "And I was grateful for that choice every single day, even when things got hard. Because at least we had a roof over our heads. At least we had something." Then she coughed, and blood speckled the handkerchief she kept by her bed. And I understood what she wasn't saying. Don't make me die worrying about your future. I love Donovan. God help me, I loved him so much it frightened me. But it was 1963, and my mother was dying, and my father had already lost his job at the mill when they started laying off older workers. Clayton represented stability. Clayton represented a future without fear, without wondering if we'd make rent, without watching someone I loved work themselves to death for pennies. The decision should have been mine, but in many ways, it had already been made for me by circumstances, by expectations, by the weight of all those unpaid medical bills, and my father's desperate eyes, and my mother's failing body. I started seeing Clayton exclusively in March of 1963. Donovan didn't make a scene. He didn't fight or argue. He just came to the diner one last time, sat at the counter, ordered coffee he didn't drink, and said, "I heard you're with Clayton now." "Yes," I said, unable to meet his eyes. "Is it what you want?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that nothing about this was what I wanted. That I wanted to climb on the back of his motorcycle and disappear into the sunset like in the movies. But instead, I said, "It's what needs to happen." He nodded slowly, stirring his coffee. "My crew is finishing up the Miller project next week. Then I'm moving on. Probably heading west, maybe Oregon, somewhere near the ocean." "That's good," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You should see the ocean." He looked at me then, those green eyes that haunted my dreams. "If that's what you need, Vera, I understand. But I want you to know something. Every day for the rest of my life, I'm gonna wish things were different. And if you ever change your mind, even if it's 40 years from now, I'll be waiting." I told him that was foolish. I told him to move on, find someone else, build a life. He just smiled sadly and said, "Can't help how I feel, Vera. Some things don't change just because they should." He left a $5 bill for the 50-cent coffee and walked out. I watched him drive away on that motorcycle, and something inside me cracked. But I was 21 years old, and I didn't know yet that broken things don't always heal right. That sometimes they heal crooked, leaving you forever off balance. I married Clayton 3 months later in a ceremony at the Presbyterian Church. My mother watched from a wheelchair, so drugged up on morphine that I'm not sure she knew where she was. She died 6 weeks after the wedding. I'd like to think she went peacefully, knowing I was taken care of. But the truth is, I'll never know if she had regrets. We never talked about it again. The medical bills were paid off. Clayton's father's dental practice had excellent insurance. That was what mattered, wasn't it? That was the responsible choice. Life with Clayton was fine. That's the word I keep coming back to, fine. He provided for me. We moved into a small house 2 blocks from his parents. They'd bought it for us as a wedding present, which Clayton saw as generous, and I saw as a leash. But I didn't complain. That wasn't what wives did in 1963. We fell into a routine quickly. Clayton left for the dental practice at 7:30 each morning, came home at 5:30. We had dinner at 6, watched television until 9, went to bed. On Sundays, we went to church, had lunch with his parents, visited my father in the afternoon. It was predictable. It was safe. It was suffocating. I got pregnant in 1965. Rebecca was born in January of 1966, and for a while, she filled the hollow places in my life. Babies do that. They demand so much of you that you don't have time to think about roads not taken, loves not chosen. Rebecca was colicky and difficult and perfect. And I threw myself into motherhood the way drowning people grasp at lifeboats. Clayton was a decent father in the distant way of men of that era. He provided. He didn't drink excessively. He never raised his hand to either of us. But he never really saw Rebecca either. She was part of the plan, another checkbox ticked: wife, house, child, dental practice. He loved her the way you love a successful investment. The years blurred together. Rebecca started school. Clayton took over his father's practice when the elder Dr. Moore retired in 1975. We bought a bigger house, got a second car, took annual vacations to Myrtle Beach, where Clayton would read dental journals on the beach, while Rebecca and I built sandcastles. I thought about Donovan sometimes, especially in those quiet moments. When Clayton fell asleep in his recliner, snoring through Johnny Carson. When I woke at 3 in the morning and couldn't remember the last time my husband had really looked at me. When I passed Miller's Point and remembered what it felt like to be 21 and in love with someone who made the whole world seem possible. But I never tried to find him. That door was closed, and I had made my choice. This was my life now, and I'd learned to be content with it. The way you learn to be content with a shoe that pinches, you just stop walking as much. Rebecca grew up. She went to college, met a good man named Thomas, got married, had children of her own. She gave me 2 grandchildren, Emma and Jacob, and they were lights in my increasingly gray life. When they visited, the house felt alive. When they left, it felt like a mausoleum again. Clayton developed hobbies as he got older. Golf, woodworking. He built a workshop in the garage and spent hours out there, crafting elaborate birdhouses and furniture that we didn't need. I think he was hiding, in his own way. From me, from the life we'd built that satisfied neither of us, from the growing awareness that we'd lived 50 years as polite strangers who happened to share a bed. We never fought. That might sound like a good thing, but it wasn't. Fighting requires passion, requires caring enough to disagree. We just coexisted, like 2 planets in adjacent orbits, never colliding, never connecting. I asked him once, in 1998, if he was happy. We were sitting on the back porch, drinking iced tea on a summer evening. The question came out of nowhere, surprising both of us. He looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes. Regret? Fear? Recognition that we'd wasted decades? And it was gone, replaced by his usual measured expression. I have everything I need, he said, which wasn't an answer at all. But are you happy? I pressed. Happiness is overrated, Vera. Stability, security, a good life, those matter more. He patted my hand absently. We've done well. Rebecca turned out fine. The practice is successful. We have grandchildren. What more is there? Love, I wanted to say. Passion, connection, feeling like you're alive instead of just existing. But I didn't say it. By then, I'd learned that some truths are better left unspoken, especially when speaking them can't change anything. Clayton had a heart attack in May of 2021. He was in his workshop, sanding a rocking chair he was building for Emma's new baby. I found him slumped over his workbench, sawdust in his hair, a peaceful expression on his face. The doctor said he probably didn't suffer, that it was quick. At the funeral, people talked about what a good man he was. Responsible, dedicated, a pillar of the community. All of it was true, but nobody mentioned love or passion or the kind of marriage that makes you grateful to wake up next to someone every morning. Because nobody knew to mention those things. From the outside, we looked perfect. Rebecca held my hand during the burial. "Are you okay, Mom?" she whispered. I nodded, because I was okay. That was the strange thing. I was sad. Clayton had been my companion for 48 years. But I wasn't devastated. I wasn't lost. If anything, I felt released. After the funeral, after the casserole stopped coming and the sympathy cards slowed to a trickle, I found myself alone in that house for the first time in my adult life. No husband watching television in the living room. No children needing dinner. No grandchildren visiting on weekends. Just me and the echoes of a life I'd lived but never quite inhabited. Rebecca kept calling, checking on me. "Mom, you need to start going through Dad's things. It's been over a year. You can't just leave everything frozen like a museum." But I couldn't bring myself to touch his belongings. The closet full of golf shirts, the garage full of tools, the workshop where he'd spent so many hours hiding from me, from us, from whatever he felt but could never name. Until 3 months ago, I woke up one morning and decided, today I would face that workshop. Maybe it was the dream I'd had the night before. I was 21 again, sitting on the back of Donovan's motorcycle, my arms around his waist, the wind in my hair. Maybe it was just that the house felt too empty, too full of ghosts. But I put on my old jeans, made a pot of strong coffee, and went out to the garage. The workshop was exactly as Clayton had left it. The rocking chair, still unfinished. Tools arranged with the precision of a man who liked control. Sawdust on every surface, smelling faintly of cedar and pine and years of careful solitude. I started with the easy things. Swept the floor, organized the tools, tried to decide what to keep, what to sell, what to donate. Rebecca had said she wanted some of the furniture for her house. Emma wanted the rocking chair, even unfinished. "I can have someone complete it, Mom. It'll be something from Grandpa." I was going through Clayton's toolboxes when I found it. He had these beautiful wooden boxes his father had given him, hand-carved walnut with brass hinges. I was emptying the largest one, sorting through drill bits and sanders, when I noticed the bottom seemed thicker than it should be. I pressed on it, lifted, and there it was, a false bottom, carefully concealed. Beneath it, an envelope, yellowed with age, the edges soft from years of hiding. Addressed to me in handwriting I recognized immediately, even after all those years. Donovan's handwriting. The postmark was from August 1969, 6 years after I married Clayton. The letter had never been opened. I sat on that dusty workshop floor for 20 minutes, just holding it. The coffee I'd made went cold on the workbench. My daughter called. I could hear the phone ringing in the house, but I couldn't move. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely hold the envelope. All I could think was, Clayton hid this. For all those years, 52 years, he hid this from me. Every day, knowing this letter existed, knowing that someone from my past had tried to reach out. And he said nothing. Do you know what it's like to realize your entire marriage was built on a lie? Not a cruel lie, perhaps. Not a malicious one. But a lie of omission so profound that it called into question everything you'd believed about your life, your choices, your relationship. Had he loved me? Or had he just wanted to possess me? Had he ever intended to tell me? Or had he planned to take this secret to his grave? I opened the letter. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost tore it. Dear Vera, I told myself I wouldn't write. I told myself you made your choice and I needed to respect that. I've been telling myself that for 6 years now, and I almost believed it. But I can't live with myself if I don't tell you the truth. Not about how I feel, you already know that. I told you I'd wait, and I meant it. But about something else. Something you deserve to know. 2 months ago, I was back in Dalton visiting my mother. She's not doing well, Arthritis has her pretty much housebound now. I took her to the doctor, and afterward, we stopped at Ferguson's bar so I could get her a ginger ale and maybe have a beer myself. Your father was there. Vera, I almost didn't recognize him. He's aged 20 years in the 6 since your mother passed. He was sitting alone at the bar, and he'd had too much to drink. Way too much. I almost left, but he saw me and waved me over. Donovan Pierce, he said, slurring the words. The boy who wasn't good enough. I should have left then, but something in his voice made me stay. He was crying, Vera. This man, who I'd always thought of as hard, unforgiving, was crying into his whiskey. He started talking. At first, it didn't make sense. Just fragments about your mother, about medical bills, about doing what had to be done. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. He said, I sold her. That's what I did. I sold my daughter to pay for my wife's treatment, and it didn't even save her. I asked him what he meant. I probably shouldn't have, but I had to know. He told me everything. The day before you agreed to marry Clayton, Clayton came to your house. You were at work at the diner. Your father answered the door. Clayton had a proposal, not for you, for your father. He said his father's dental practice needed a receptionist, someone reliable, someone the patients would like. The position came with good pay and excellent health insurance. Insurance that would cover your mother's medical bills, all of them, retroactively and going forward. But there was a condition. You had to agree to marry Clayton first. Not just date him, not just give him a chance. Marry him. Your father said yes. He didn't ask you. He didn't tell you about the conditions. He just made a deal with Clayton Moore right there on your front porch while you were serving coffee to truckers and dreaming about a different life. Then Clayton proposed to you that night, and your father sat you down afterward. He told you that marrying Clayton was the responsible thing to do, that your mother needed stability and insurance, that I was a dreamer who would break your heart and leave you poor, that you owed it to your mother to choose security. But he never told you about the deal, did he? He never told you that Clayton had bought you, essentially, that your choice wasn't a choice at all, but a transaction negotiated while you were at work. Vera, I'm not writing this to make you hate your father. He was watching your mother die, and he was desperate, and he did what he thought was necessary. And maybe you knew all of this already. Maybe your father told you, and you chose Clayton anyway for your own reasons. And that's fine. I can live with that. But I can't live with the possibility that you didn't know, that you thought you were making a free choice when really you were fulfilling a contract you never agreed to. Because if you didn't know, if you married Clayton thinking it was your decision, your sacrifice, your choice, then you deserve to know the truth. You had options, Vera. You always did. I would have worked 3 jobs. We could have figured out the medical bills together. Or you could have still chosen Clayton, knowing everything, and that would have been your right. But you should have been able to make that choice with all the information. Your father made me promise not to tell you. He was crying so hard by the end of the conversation, begging me not to ruin your life by dredging up the past. He said you seemed content, that you had a daughter, that you'd adjusted to your marriage. He said knowing the truth would only hurt you, but I think not knowing hurts worse. I moved to Oregon last year. I'm working on a fishing boat up in Coos Bay. It's good work, honest work. The ocean is everything I imagined and more. I've got a little place near the water. Nothing fancy, just a small house with a view of the bay. It's not much, but it's peaceful. I wake up every morning to the sound of seagulls and waves, and I think about the boy I used to be, the one who promised to wait for a girl who chose someone else. I'm still that boy, Vera. Older, more weathered, but still waiting. Not because I'm foolish, not because I haven't tried to move on. I have tried. I've dated, I've even come close to proposing to someone once. But every time, I think about you, about what we could have had, about whether you're happy, whether you got what you needed, whether that choice was worth it. I'm 31 years old. I'm still young enough to build a different life. But I can't do it without knowing that you made a real choice, that you knew everything and chose anyway. Because if you didn't know, if your father and Clayton stole your choice from you, then maybe, just maybe, it's not too late to choose again. I'm not asking you to leave your husband. I'm not asking you to blow up your life. I'm just asking you to know the truth. And if, knowing the truth, you're happy with the choice you made, then I'll accept that. I'll stop waiting. I'll try to build a life that doesn't have a Vera-shaped hole in it. But if you're not happy, if you've been living a life you didn't fully choose, if there's any part of you that wonders what if, then I'm here, in Coos Bay, working on the boats, living in a small house on Anchor Street, waiting, still waiting. I don't know if you'll get this letter. I don't know if your husband will intercept it, or if you'll read it and tear it up, or if you'll write back telling me to leave you alone. Any of those outcomes is fine. I just need you to know the truth. You deserved better, Vera. You deserved to make your own choice. And I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for you back then. I'm sorry I respected your choice when maybe I should have questioned it. Should have asked you what you really wanted without your father in the room. But I'm not sorry for loving you. I'll never be sorry for that. If you ever want to find me, I'll be here. Not waiting in suspended animation, but living my life with a door left open. Always open. For you. Yours, always and forever, Donovan Pierce. P.S. There's a diner here called The Anchor. I go there every Saturday morning at 9 for coffee and pancakes. If you ever find yourself in Coos Bay on a Saturday morning, that's where I'll be. I read that letter 15 times that first day, sitting on the floor of Clayton's workshop, while the afternoon sun slanted through the windows and turned the sawdust into gold. Each time, I discovered new layers of hurt, new revelations, new questions. My father had made a deal. Clayton had paid for me, essentially, like I was property to be negotiated over. And my mother? Had she known? Had she been part of it? Or had she died thinking I'd made a free choice? But worse than all of that was the knowledge that Clayton had intercepted this letter. That for 52 years, he'd known Donovan had tried to reach me. That he'd hidden it away in his workshop, carrying the secret through decades of our marriage, taking it almost to his grave. Had he read it? He must have. The envelope had been carefully slit open and resealed, the kind of precise work Clayton brought to everything. He'd known exactly what Donovan had written. He'd known about the deal my father made. And he'd said nothing. I tried to understand his thinking. He must have been terrified, I realized. Terrified that if I knew the truth, I'd leave. That I'd realize our entire marriage was built on a transaction rather than love. That I'd understand I'd never really chosen him at all. But by hiding the letter, he'd stolen my choice a second time. First with my father, purchasing me like cattle. Then again, keeping information from me that might have changed everything. I sat in that workshop until it was dark outside. Then I stood up, folded the letter carefully, and went into the house. I called Rebecca. "Did your father ever mention someone named Donovan Pierce?" I asked without preamble. There was a long silence. "Mom, why are you asking about him? You know who he is?" Yes. I found a photograph once, when I was maybe 16. I was going through a box in the attic, looking for old photo albums for a school project. There was a picture of you with some man on a motorcycle. You were young, maybe 20, and you were laughing. You looked different, happier than I'd ever seen you. My breath caught. I'd forgotten about that photograph. Donovan had taken it with a camera he'd borrowed from someone, set it on a timer. We'd been at Miller's Point. Dad came up while I was looking at it, Rebecca continued. He got weird about it, really weird. Grabbed the photo out of my hand and said some things, Mom. He said that guy was someone from your past who'd tried to ruin your life. He said you'd made the right choice by staying away from him, that men like that were dangerous, unstable. He made me promise never to mention it to you because it would upset you. What's going on? Why are you asking about this now? I told her everything. About the letter, about the deal my father and Clayton had made, about 40 years of wondering what if, about a marriage that had been fine but never right, about secrets hidden in workshops and the choice I'd never really been allowed to make. Rebecca was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you went through that. I'm so sorry, Dad. She trailed off. Don't apologize for your father, I said. He gave me you, and I wouldn't trade you for anything in this world. But I need to know, do you think I'm crazy for wondering about Donovan? For thinking about trying to find him? Another long pause. Mom, are you asking permission? Maybe. I don't know. This is insane, isn't it? I'm 73 years old. This man is 75, if he's even still alive. He's probably married with grandchildren. It's been 60 years. People don't just... Aw, Mom, Rebecca interrupted gently. You just found out your entire marriage was based on a lie. You just discovered that the man you gave up actually tried to reach you, tried to tell you the truth, and Dad hid it from you. If you want to find this Donovan person, if you want answers or closure or whatever you need, then that's not crazy. That's human. But what if what? What if he's moved on? Then you'll know. What if he doesn't remember you the way you remember him? Then you'll know that too. But Mom, what if he's been waiting? What if he meant what he said in that letter? Don't you deserve to know? I started crying then. 60 years of held-back tears finally breaking through. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can, and I'm going to help you. Rebecca came over the next day with her laptop. She was a teacher, comfortable with technology in a way I'd never been. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, she said, setting up at the kitchen table. It took 3 days of searching. Donovan Pierce wasn't on Facebook. He didn't have Instagram or Twitter. But Rebecca was persistent, checking public records, old newspaper archives, anything that might give us a clue about where he'd ended up. On the third day, she found something. An article from the Coos Bay Gazette, dated 2 years ago. It was about a group of retired fishermen who'd started a volunteer program teaching maritime skills to at-risk youth. The program was called Second Chances. There was a photograph accompanying the article. 6 older men standing on a dock, fishing equipment around them, the bay stretching out behind them. Third from the left, Donovan Pierce. I recognized him immediately. Older, yes. Gray hair when there had once been dark brown. Lines on his face etched by sun and sea and time. But those eyes, still green, still intense, still somehow familiar, even after 60 years. Mom, Rebecca said gently, you're crying. I was. For the first time since Clayton's funeral, I was crying. For the girl I'd been who thought she had no choice. For the decades spent in a marriage that was fine, but never right. For the man who'd waited. Who'd kept a door open. Who'd built a life in Oregon by the sea just like he'd said he would. He looks happy, I whispered. He looks like someone who's lived a good life, Rebecca agreed. But Mom, we don't know if he's married or... I know, but I have to try. I have to at least. I don't even know what I have to do. But I can't just let this go. Not now, not after everything. Rebecca reached across the table and took my hand. Then we're booking you a flight to Oregon. Now, just like that? Mom, you're 73 years old. Dad's been gone for over 2 years. You spent your entire life doing what was responsible, what was expected. For once, do something just because you want to. Take a chance. See what happens. I'm terrified. Good. That means it matters. The article mentioned that the program met at the Bay Community Center on Saturday mornings. Rebecca printed out the address, looked up flights, found a small bed and breakfast near the water. Before I could talk myself out of it, she'd booked everything for the following weekend. What do I even say to him? I asked, panic rising. Hi, I'm the woman who chose someone else 60 years ago, but I just found out my marriage was a lie and I thought I'd stop by? Rebecca laughed, but kindly. Mom, you'll figure it out. Just be honest. Tell him the truth. That's all any of us can do. The week before the trip was the longest of my life. I changed my mind every day, sometimes multiple times a day. This was insane. This was pathetic. I was a widow tracking down a man I hadn't spoken to in 60 years, based on a letter written when we were both young and foolish. But every time I decided not to go, I'd read that letter again. I'm still waiting. Not waiting in suspended animation, but living my life with a door left open, always open, for you. Had he meant it? After all these years, Could he possibly still mean it? I packed and repacked my suitcase a dozen times. What does a 73-year-old woman wear to meet her past? I settled on simple clothes. Jeans, a blue sweater, Rebecca said brought out my eyes. Comfortable shoes. I wasn't trying to look like the 21-year-old girl he'd loved. That girl was gone. I needed him to see me as I was now. Older, weathered by time and choices, but still here, still wondering. Rebecca drove me to the airport. At the security checkpoint, she hugged me tight. Whatever happens, Mom, I'm proud of you. You're doing something brave. I'm doing something crazy. Sometimes they're the same thing. The flight to Coos Bay was the longest 5 hours of my life, even though the actual time was shorter with connections. Every moment felt stretched, elastic, full of too many thoughts. I kept the letter in my purse, touching it occasionally like a talisman. Proof that this wasn't completely insane, that someone had once loved me enough to wait. A young woman sat next to me on the second leg of the flight. She asked if I was visiting family in Oregon. I almost said yes, because it was easier than the truth. But something made me tell her, I'm going to see someone I loved 60 years ago, I said. I just found out my husband hid a letter from him. I'm 73 years old and I'm flying across the country to find out if he still remembers me. She looked at me for a long moment, and I expected judgment or confusion. Instead, she smiled. That's the most romantic thing I've ever heard, she said. I hope he's there. I hope he's been waiting. What if he hasn't? Then at least you tried. That's more than most people can say. We talked for the rest of the flight. She told me about her own love story. A boy she'd met in college, lost touch with, reconnected with through social media. They were getting married next month. Life is too short for what ifs, she said. My grandmother always told me that. She said her biggest regret was not telling a man she loved him because she was afraid. She carried that regret for 50 years. Don't be like her. When we landed, she hugged me. This stranger who now knew my deepest secret. Good luck, she whispered. Go find your happy ending. The bed and breakfast was small, quaint, with a view of the bay from my room. I checked in late Friday afternoon, too nervous to do anything but sit by the window and watch the water. The ocean was gray-green, choppy with whitecaps, nothing like the calm fantasy I'd imagined. But it was beautiful in its wildness, its refusal to be tamed. That night, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing what I'd say, how I'd explain. Every scenario ended badly in my mind. He'd be married. He'd have forgotten me. He'd be angry that I'd shown up after all these years. He'd pity me, this old woman chasing ghosts. By morning, I'd almost convinced myself to go back to the airport. But I thought about Rebecca's words. For once, do something just because you want to. The Bay Community Center was exactly as the article described. A weathered building near the docks, paint peeling but solid. Real. I sat in my rental car for 30 minutes, watching people go in and out. Fishermen carrying equipment, teenagers in groups, some looking eager, some looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Volunteers directing traffic, organizing. Then I saw him. He was carrying a box of what looked like fishing tackle, moving slowly but steadily. He wore jeans and a thick flannel shirt, the kind that had probably been worn 1,000 times and would last 1,000 more. His hair was completely gray now, longer than he'd worn it in his youth, pulled back in a small ponytail. He had reading glasses hanging from a cord around his neck, but it was him. After 60 years, across a parking lot, I knew him. He set down the box to adjust his grip, and that's when he saw me. I'd gotten out of the car without realizing it, without deciding to, my body moving on instinct. We stood there, in the parking lot of a community center in Oregon. Two people who had last seen each other when the world was completely different. When Kennedy was president, and we thought we had all the time in the world. The box nearly slipped from his hands. He caught it, set it down carefully on the pavement, took 3 steps toward me, stopped, as if afraid that if he moved any closer, I might disappear. Vera, my name, in his voice after all these years. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. You got my letter. His voice was deeper now, roughened by time and cigarettes he'd probably smoked and quit, by decades of calling out over waves and wind. 40 years late, I managed. Clayton hit it. Something changed in his face. Not anger, not even surprise. Sadness. Deep, knowing sadness. I wondered, he said. I wondered if maybe your father had intercepted it, or Clayton, or if you just decided not to respond. But I hoped you just never gotten it. Because the alternative was that I'd chosen to ignore you. That I'd read it and decided you weren't worth responding to. I took a step closer. I never would have done that, Donovan. Never. I know, he said softly. Deep down, I always knew. You aren't that kind of person. But not knowing, it makes you doubt everything. A teenager walked past us, gave us a curious look. Donovan glanced back at the community center, at the people waiting. I have to help set up for the program. It starts in 20 minutes. But after, he stopped, looking at me like he was afraid I might vanish. Are you staying? Can you stay? I'm here for the weekend, I said. I'm staying at the Bayview Inn. His face broke into a smile then. That same smile I remembered, maybe a little crooked now, maybe missing a tooth in the back, but still his. That's 3 blocks from my house, he said. Vera, give me 2 hours. Can you give me 2 hours to get through this program? Then we can talk. Really talk. I nodded. I've waited 60 years. I can wait 2 more hours. He laughed, and the sound of it cracked something open in my chest. There's a diner around the corner. The Anchor. You probably think I made that up from the letter, but it's real. I'll meet you there at noon. The Anchor, I repeated, where you have coffee and pancakes every Saturday morning. You remembered that. I've read that letter probably 100 times in the last week. I've memorized every word. He took another step toward me, close enough now that I could see the lines around his eyes, the freckles on his hands that had darkened with age, the small scar above his left eyebrow that hadn't been there before. I meant every word, Vera, then and now. Then he turned and walked back to the community center, but not before glancing back at me twice, as if making sure I was really there. I went to the diner and ordered coffee I couldn't drink. The waitress was an older woman, probably in her 60s, with kind eyes and a name tag that said Marlene. You okay, honey? She asked. You look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that, I said. I'm meeting someone I haven't seen in 60 years. Her face lit up. Let me guess, Donovan? I stared at her. How did you... Honey, I've been working here for 20 years. Donovan comes in every Saturday, sits at that corner booth, has his coffee and pancakes. And at least once a month, he tells me about this girl he knew back in Pennsylvania. Vera, right? Says she was the love of his life. Says she probably doesn't even remember him anymore. But he can't seem to help remembering her. You're her, aren't you? I couldn't speak, could only nod. Marlene's eyes filled with tears. Well, I'll be damned. He said you had blonde hair and blue eyes, said you were the prettiest thing he'd ever seen. He was right. She patted my hand. You want some privacy? That corner booth is yours. I'll make sure nobody bothers you. Thank you, I whispered. No, honey, thank you. Some of us have been rooting for this story to have a happy ending for a long time. The 2 hours felt like 2 years. I watched the clock on the wall, counting minutes. What would I say? How would I explain everything? The letter, Clayton's deception, my father's deal, the life I'd lived that should have been different. At exactly noon, the door opened and Donovan walked in. He changed clothes, clean jeans, a blue button-down shirt that brought out the color of his eyes. He'd shaved, combed his hair. His hands were shaking slightly as he slid into the booth across from me. Hi, he said. Hi. Marlene appeared with coffee for both of us and 2 menus. I'll give you folks some time, she said, winking at me. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. 60 years collapsed into nothing. I could see the young man he'd been and the old man before me. Could see the dreams and disappointments written on his face, the life lived without me. I don't know where to start, I finally said. Start with the letter. Tell me about finding the letter. So I did. I told him about Clayton's death, about finally cleaning out the workshop, about finding the false bottom in the toolbox, about reading his words and understanding, for the first time, that my entire marriage had been built on lies and transactions and stolen choices. I told him about my father's deal with Clayton, about how I'd thought I was making a responsible choice when really I was fulfilling a contract I'd never agreed to, about my mother dying 6 weeks after my wedding, never knowing, or maybe knowing and taking that knowledge to her grave. I had a daughter, I said, Rebecca. She's 49 now, and she's the only part of that marriage I don't regret. She's wonderful, Donovan, smart and kind, and she's the one who helped me find you. Tell me about her, he said softly. So I did. I told him about Rebecca, about my grandchildren, about the life I'd lived that was fine but never quite right, about the hollowness of spending 50 years with someone who never really saw me, who'd chosen to build our life on secrets rather than truth. What about you? I asked. The letter said you'd never married. Is that still true? He nodded slowly. I came close once, about 15 years ago. Met a woman at the marina, a widow whose husband had been a fisherman. Her name was Patricia. She was kind, good company. We dated for almost 3 years. What happened? I proposed. She said yes. We set a date, and then 2 weeks before the wedding, she came to me and said, Donovan, you're a good man, but you're not mine. You're still waiting for someone else. I can see it in your eyes when you think I'm not looking, and I deserve someone who's fully present, not someone still holding a candle for a ghost. I'm sorry, I whispered. Don't be. She was right. I tried to move on, Vera. God knows I tried, but some loves don't fade just because you want them to. Some loves get into your bones and stay there. Did you hate me for choosing Clayton? He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was calloused, rough from years of work, but his touch was gentle. I never hated you. I was angry for a while, hurt, but hate? Never. I understood why you chose him. Security, stability, your mother's medical bills. Those were real concerns. I was 23 years old working construction, dreaming about fishing boats in the ocean. What could I offer you? Yourself, I said. You could have offered me yourself, and I would have said yes if I'd known the truth, if I'd known about the deal my father made. Would you? He asked quietly. Knowing your mother was dying? Knowing you could have insurance that would give her comfort in her last months? Are you sure you wouldn't have made the same choice? I thought about this. Really thought about it. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe I would have, but at least it would have been my choice. At least I would have known the truth. And Clayton? Donovan asked. Did you love him? I considered lying, out of some old loyalty to the man I'd buried. But Donovan deserved the truth. No, I cared about him, I appreciated him, but I never loved him. Not the way I loved you. Not the way I love... I stopped, the present tense hanging in the air between us. Say it, Donovan whispered. Not the way I love you. The words came out in a rush. I know that's insane. I know I don't even know you anymore. That we're different people now. That 60 years is too long to hold on to a feeling. But I do. I love you. I've always loved you. And finding that letter, reading your words, knowing you tried to reach me, it broke something open in me that's been closed for decades. Donovan's eyes were wet. I'm 75 years old, Vera. I've got arthritis in my knees that acts up in cold weather. My hearing isn't what it used to be. Too many years on fishing boats with no ear protection. I take blood pressure medication and cholesterol pills. I'm not the young man you knew. I'm 73, I countered. I've got arthritis too, in my hands and my spine. I need reading glasses. I can't eat dairy anymore without consequences. I'm not the young woman you knew either. He smiled through his tears. You're still the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. Donovan, I meant it, Vera. In that letter, every word. I'm still waiting, and I'm done waiting alone. The diner had gone quiet around us. I realized, dimly, that Marlene and the other waitresses were watching, not even pretending to work, but I didn't care. I don't know how this works, I said. I've never done this before. This starting over thing. Neither have I, he said. So we'll figure it out together. We talked for 6 hours that day. Marlene brought us food, pancakes, sandwiches, coffee that got cold while we talked and had to be refilled. We talked about everything, the years we'd missed, the lives we'd lived separately, the dreams we'd had, and the ones we'd achieved, and the ones that had died. He told me about his years on the fishing boats, about the friends he'd made and lost, about the ocean in all its moods, about starting the Second Chances program 5 years ago because he wanted to give kids the opportunities he'd never had, about his small house on Anchor Street with a view of the bay, about the garden he kept in the backyard where he grew tomatoes and herbs. I told him about raising Rebecca, about the pride and terror of being a mother, about watching Clayton grow more distant over the years, retreating into his workshop the way some men retreating into bottles or affairs, about my grandchildren and the pure joy they brought to a life that had otherwise felt like going through motions. Can I see where you live? I asked finally, as the afternoon was turning to evening. He smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. His house was exactly as I'd imagined from his letter. Small, weathered blue paint with a porch that overlooked the bay. Inside, it was tidy in the way of someone who lives alone and has made peace with solitude. Books everywhere, thrillers and histories and poetry. Photographs on the walls of boats and sunsets and smiling people. And on the mantel above his fireplace, a single photograph. Me, at 21, on the back of his motorcycle, laughing at something he'd said. The photo I'd forgotten existed, the one Rebecca had found in the attic that Clayton had hidden away. How do you have this? I whispered. I kept the negative, he said quietly. Developed a copy before I gave you the original. I've carried it with me everywhere I've moved. It's been on mantles in 6 different states. People ask who you are, and I tell them, the woman I loved, the one that got away. I touched the frame with shaking fingers. I looked so young. We both were. But look at your eyes. Vera, look at your smile. You were happy then. I was happy with you. He came to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. Are you staying? He asked quietly. Not just for the weekend. Really staying? I don't know, I said honestly. I have a life back in Pennsylvania. Rebecca, my grandchildren, a house full of Clayton's things and my things, and 48 years of accumulated life. I'm not asking you to erase your life. I'm asking if there's room in it for me, or if we can build something new together. Here, there, somewhere in between. I don't care where we are, as long as we're together. I turned to face him. He was inches away. This man who had waited 60 years, who had kept my photograph on his mantle like a shrine to a possibility, who had built a good life but left space for me in it. I'm scared, I admitted. Me too, terrified. He took my hands. But I've been scared for 60 years, Vera. Scared you'd forgotten me. Scared you were unhappy and I couldn't help. Scared I'd die without ever seeing you again. This is a different kind of scared. This is the good kind. What if it doesn't work? What if we've changed too much? Then we'll have tried. We'll have had whatever time we get. That's more than we've had for 60 years. What if... He kissed me, gently, carefully, like I was something precious that might break. And for the first time in 60 years, I felt like I was home. When we pulled apart, I was crying. I loved him too, I said. Clayton, not the way I loved you, but I loved him. He was Rebecca's father. He provided for us. He wasn't a bad man. I know. But he wasn't you. He was never you. I know that too. I stayed that night in Donovan's guest room. We sat on his porch until late, wrapped in blankets against the Oregon cold, watching the lights of boats on the bay and talking about everything and nothing. About whether we believed in fate or just lucky chances. About what we'd do differently if we could go back. About whether the pain of all those years apart was worth the joy of this moment. I wouldn't change it, Donovan said finally. Not if changing it meant Rebecca didn't exist. Not if it meant you missed out on being a mother, being a grandmother. Those things shaped you into who you are now. And I love who you are now. Even though I chose someone else, you didn't choose, Vera. That's what you need to understand. You were never given a real choice. Your father and Clayton made sure of that. And even if you had chosen Clayton freely, even if you'd known everything and still picked him, I would have understood. I wouldn't have liked it, but I would have understood. The next morning, Saturday, we went back to the Anchor for breakfast. Marlene was there again, and when she saw us come in together, she actually cried. I knew it. She said, "I knew this story needed a happy ending." "It's not an ending," Donovan said, looking at me. "It's a beginning." I flew back to Pennsylvania on Monday, but everything had changed. Rebecca picked me up from the airport and took one look at my face and smiled. "So?" she asked. "So," I said, "I'm moving to Oregon." It wasn't immediate. These things never are when you're 73 and have a lifetime of accumulated possessions and connections. Rebecca helped me sort through the house, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to give away. We had estate sales and donation pickups. We cried over photographs and laughed at forgotten memories. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Rebecca asked one day as we packed up the kitchen. "More sure than I've been about anything in 60 years. "What about Dad? His memory?" I thought about this carefully. "Your father loved you. He provided for us. He wasn't cruel or abusive, but he also built our life on secrets and lies. And I can't spend the rest of my life honoring a marriage that was never really mine to begin with." "But you don't hate him?" "No. I'm angry, yes, I'm hurt. But I also understand he was afraid. He knew what he had wasn't quite enough, and he held on too tight. I can't hate him for being human." Rebecca hugged me then. "I'm going to miss you. Oregon is in Mars. You can visit, and I'll come back. I'm not disappearing from your life, sweetheart. I'm just finally starting my own." Donovan flew out to help with the move. Rebecca was nervous about meeting him, this man from her mother's past who was rewriting her understanding of our family. But within an hour of his arrival, she was laughing at his stories about the fishing boats, asking him about Oregon, planning visits. "You make her happy," Rebecca told him privately. I heard this later from both of them. "I've never seen her like this. She was always content with Dad, settled. But with you, she's alive. She makes me happy too." Donovan had replied, "Happier than I thought I'd ever be at 75. That was 6 weeks ago. I'm writing this from Donovan's house. Our house now, I suppose, though we're still figuring out the logistics of shared space after decades of living alone. My furniture hasn't arrived yet, but I don't mind sleeping in his guest room for now. We have coffee on the porch every morning, watching the boats come in. He holds my hand. I rest my head on his shoulder. And sometimes I close my eyes and I'm 21 again, riding on the back of his motorcycle, thinking I had all the time in the world. But I'm not 21. I'm 73, and I know now that we don't have all the time in the world. We have whatever time is left. 10 years, 20 if we're lucky, less if we're not. Every moment is precious because we know how easily it can be stolen, how quickly decades can pass while you're living a life you never fully chose. Rebecca calls every Sunday. Emma and Jacob are planning to visit at Christmas. They want to see the ocean, meet Grandma's friend. Rebecca hasn't quite figured out how to explain this to them yet, and neither have I. Donovan is already planning activities, teaching them to fish, taking them tide pooling, showing them the Second Chances program. Yesterday, he asked me to marry him. Not formally, not with a ring or a bended knee. We were sitting on the porch and he just said, "I know we're old and it's complicated with Social Security and all that, but would you marry me anyway? I've been waiting 60 years to ask you properly." I told him yes. Of course yes. We're planning a small ceremony next month. Just Rebecca and Thomas and the grandkids and a few of Donovan's friends from the marina. Nothing fancy. No white dress or elaborate cake. Just two people finally getting to make their own choice. Sometimes I think about Clayton, about whether he's somewhere watching this unfold, whether he's angry or sad, or whether he understands now why his careful plans never quite made me happy. I hope he understands. I hope he's at peace. And my father, he's been dead 30 years now. I used to be angry with him for the deal he made, for trading my future to pay for my mother's comfort. But I understand desperation better now. I understand that people make impossible choices in impossible circumstances, that sometimes love looks like control and sacrifice looks like betrayal. I forgive him. I forgive Clayton. I even forgive myself for the years I spent settling for fine instead of fighting for happy, for the dreams I buried because they seemed impractical, for not questioning my choices sooner. But more than forgiveness, I've learned this. It's never too late. That's what I want everyone reading this to know. It's never too late to choose love. Real love. The kind that waits 60 years and still feels like coming home. The kind that looks at your 73-year-old face and sees the 21-year-old you used to be and loves both versions equally. It's never too late to ask questions, to demand truth, to refuse to accept a life that feels like a compromise. It's never too late to take a chance, to buy a plane ticket, to knock on a door you thought was closed forever. I spent 60 years thinking I'd made my choice and had to live with it. I was wrong. Every day is a new choice. Every morning you wake up, you get to decide. Will I keep settling? Or will I take a chance on something better? Donovan says I should tell people that forgiveness is important. That you can't move forward if you're carrying resentment for the people who shaped your past. He's right, of course. But I'd add this. Forgive them, but also forgive yourself. For the choices you made under pressure. For the dreams you set aside. For the years you spent being content instead of happy. For not knowing what you didn't know. And then, if you get the chance, even if it's 60 years late, even if it seems impossible, even if everyone thinks you're crazy, choose love. Choose yourself. Choose the life you actually want, not the life you think you should have. This morning, Donovan made me coffee. He remembers I like it with cream and 1 sugar, a detail Clayton never quite got right in 48 years. We sat on the porch and watched the sunrise paint the bay in shades of pink and gold. He told me about a sailing trip he wants to take next month, down the coast to California. He asked if I'd go with him. I said yes. I'll always say yes now. I said no for too long, lived too carefully, protected myself from disappointment by never reaching for joy. Life is long, but it's also short. That's the paradox. Long enough for 60 years to pass in what feels like a moment. Short enough that you can't afford to waste a single day living someone else's version of your life. I'm 73 years old. I've got arthritis and reading glasses and gray hair. But I'm finally living my own life, choosing my own path. Loving who I want to love without shame or compromise or secret deals negotiated in my absence. And every morning when I wake up in this small house by the ocean, with the man who waited 60 years, I think I'm home. Finally, impossibly, miraculously home. With hope and gratitude and more happiness than I knew was possible. Vera Hutchins Pierce, soon Coos Bay, Oregon. That's Vera's story, my friends. I had to stop reading multiple times because my eyes were too blurred to see the words clearly. I spoke with Vera last week, and she wanted me to tell you several things. First, that she and Donovan are getting married next month. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. She said, tell your listeners we're registered at the fishing supply store, and she was only half joking. Second, that Rebecca comes to visit once a month. The relationship between Vera and her daughter has deepened in ways Vera never expected. We're honest with each other now, Vera told me. Really honest. Not just polite. And that's changed everything. Third, and most importantly, Vera wanted me to tell you this. I don't regret my marriage to Clayton. It gave me Rebecca, and Rebecca gave me Emma and Jacob. But I also won't pretend it was what I wanted or needed. Both things can be true. You can be grateful for what was and still angry about what could have been. You can love the life you had and still leave it for something better. I asked Vera what she'd say to someone listening who thinks it's too late for them, that they've made their choices and now they have to live with them. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, tell them to go find their letter, whatever their letter is, the phone call they never made, the door they never knocked on, the dream they gave up on. Tell them to go find it. Because even if it's been 40 years, even if 60 years have passed, even if they're 73 years old and think they're too old for second chances, they're not. No one is ever too old for second chances. That's why we call them second chances. She also said, tell them I'm scared every single day. This is terrifying. Starting over at 73 is terrifying. But being scared means you're doing something that matters. And I'd rather be scared and alive than safe and numb. Vera sent us another photograph with her letter. This one shows her and Donovan on that same porch, in almost the exact same pose as the one from when they were 21. 60 years apart, and somehow exactly the same. You can see the joy in their faces, the wonder that they found each other again after all this time. But you can also see something else. You can see peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally making your own choices, from living authentically, from refusing to let other people's fears define your life. Now, I know some of you are listening to this and thinking about your own crossroads, your own Donovans or Veras, your own letters that were never sent or were sent but never answered, your own dreams you set aside because they seemed impractical or scary or impossible. Let me tell you something. They're not impossible. Maybe impractical, maybe scary, but not impossible. Nothing is impossible until you decide it is. And maybe you're thinking, but I'm not 73. I'm 55 or 62 or 81. It's too late for me. The moment has passed. That's exactly what Vera thought. For 60 years, she thought the moment had passed. She was wrong. The moment doesn't pass. We pass through moments, but the moments themselves are always there, waiting for us to be brave enough to reach for them. So here's what I want you to do. Right now, today, think about your letter. What's the thing you gave up on? What's the dream you set aside? Who's the person you let go of because it seemed like the responsible thing to do? And then, ask yourself, is it really too late? Or have I just convinced myself it's too late because being convinced is easier than being brave? You don't have to fly to Oregon. You don't have to upend your entire life. But you have to do something. Make the phone call, write the email. Take the first small step toward the life you actually want, instead of the life you settled for. Because here's the truth that Vera learned, and that I want you to learn too. You are not too old. It is not too late. You still have time. Not unlimited time, none of us do, but enough time. Time to make different choices. Time to be honest about what you want. Time to stop living for everyone else and start living for yourself. Vera ended her letter with this. Tell them that every morning I wake up and I can't believe this is my life. After 60 years of fine, I finally have wonderful. And if I can have it at 73, anyone can have it at any age. You just have to be brave enough to reach for it. So be brave. Take the chance. Find your letter. Knock on the door. Make the call. Life is too short to spend it wondering what if. And it's never, ever too late for a second chance. Until next time, this is Second Chapters. Remember, your story isn't over until you decide it's over. And even then, there's always room for one more chapter. Please, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment if this story moved you. And most importantly, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because stories like Vera's deserve to be told. They deserve to be believed. They deserve to inspire. And if you have a story like Vera's, a second chance, a late love, a secret that changed everything, we want to hear it. Send it to us. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take that first brave step. We're reading your stories now. Make yours the next one we share. Thank you for listening. Now go live your second chapter.